A very good morning to all of you. I am Shishir Kant. I am Senior Partner in Masin Projects. On behalf of Masin, I welcome all the participants as well as the distinguished panelists who have invested their valuable time on this busy Monday morning. I will be the moderator for this session, which is first of the two-day event, Symposium on Construction Dispute and Arbitration, being held on 5th and 6th July 2021. Before diving deep into the discussion, I would like to inform the participant about a few points. This session is being recorded and the video will be available to the site through which the registration has been done. There will be a question and answer session towards the end, and you can ask your questions in the message box. There is a poll question which will be coming to your screen. Please respond to this simple question and we will be back to you. Now, the topic of this session is COVID-related construction claims, industry and legal perspective. As we all know that COVID-19 pandemic is the global health crisis and is the greatest humanitarian challenge the world has faced since World War II. Along with this unprecedented human toll, COVID has triggered a deep global crisis with many uncertainties. The COVID pandemic has already had its profound impact on all sectors of economy worldwide, and construction industry is no exception to it. However, COVID implications varied from country to country, project to project, and contract to contract. COVID has affected all the stakeholders in the construction business: employer, authority, contractor, subcontractor, vendor, consultant, and also employees and labor. It has caused severe delays along with massive disruption to the global supply chain and resource deployment. Now, with this background, I am introducing to the amazing panelists of this session who are the technical and legal experts in the construction field. Let us discuss these COVID issues with them from all possible angles, from factual, policy related, contractual, and legal aspects. The first panelist is Mr. K.R.R. Chandran, Vice President and Head, Corporate Service, Heavy Civil L&T. Mr. Chandran is a senior business leader with over 25 years of experience across construction, project management, and strategic growth of multiple business units. As accomplished professional with a wealth of experience in executing high-value projects across different segments of construction, Mr. Chandran has covered extensive aspects of business as well as tendering, execution, and delivery. The next panelist is Mr. Sudeep Malik, Partner Khetan and Company. Mr. Malik heads the real estate and hospitality practice and specializes in construction contract and disputes. He has often appeared in many courts in arbitration for developers, contractors, corporate, and institutional clients for dispute pertaining to real estate, construction contracts, and commercial contracts. He is named by Legal 500 as a leading individual in the real estate and construction sector, ranked as Tier 1 in year 2018, 19, 20, and 21 rankings. The next panelist is Mr. Aniruddha Krishnan, Managing Partner, AK Law Chambers. Mr. Krishnan specializes in arbitration and commercial dispute resolution and insolvency law and regularly appears before the domestic and international arbitral tribunals constituted under ICC, LCIA, SIAC, and MTEC rules. He has been awarded the Rising Star 40 Under 40 title by Legal Era and has contributed a chapter on his life story book titled On the Rise. And lastly, myself, Shishir Kant, I am senior partner in Masin. I have over 20 years of experience in construction with specialization in contract management and claim consultancy. I have been associated as a claim analyst and expert witness for the delay and cost matters in many disputes and arbitrations. I welcome all the panelists for this session And now let us start the discussion with our panelists. So my first question for the session is to Mr. Chandran. Mr. Chandran, you are from the construction industry and belong to one of the India's most reputed construction groups, L&T. You must be dealing with various stakeholders, employers, authorities, vendors, employees, as well as laborers during the pandemic time. So, what has been your first-hand experience related to the impact of COVID-19 on the ongoing construction projects?
Yeah, very good morning, Mr. Shishir, and I also welcome the participants and august audience from the employers, subcontractors, and various other fraternity from the industry. And as per what I understand from you is the first-hand information about the COVID situation or the pandemic which has happened in March 2020, last year. Maybe in India, it started in March 23, after onwards the lockdown started. And the immediate attention of the nation or the project construction companies and the government was to take care of the people who are working in the industry. Because we had about 3 lakhs construction of workers deployed in various sites. Our management also took initiative to just take care of the people in the beginning, to take care of the prevention of the spreading and in the colonies by adopting the norms which has been prescribed for the pandemic. And that way we were able to curtail our spread from the labor quarters, which is a main area vulnerable to pandemic. And of course, from March 23rd onwards up to May 18, was the government announced a lockdown for the workers not to get into the execution. During that period, we were only to maintain, and government had given some support of medicines and other local facilities during that time. Therefore, the first instant of protecting the workers from getting into the infection was majorly handled by L&T, and also I think most of the contractors did the same. And government also had supported because nobody was aware what is going to happen because it was not a known thing. Therefore, first-hand experience was very, very challenging, and there was a lot of cooperation from all the departments, maybe whatever public department or private department, they were very cooperative. And only thing what we couldn't avoid is the people were, as soon as the first opportunity came, they went away. That was the biggest challenge we faced in the industry. And we were also not able to know when they will return back. We were also not having an idea when this will end because the spread was happening state by state, and the people have been deployed from various states, not because they don't come from one state for construction works. That was the immediate challenge which we had to face. Never we were assuming that this challenge of labor getting back into the act will take some 2-3 months on till the Q2. We will have to mobilize the labor. Thereafter, what happens? The monsoon starts normally in some of the areas, and festival season also starts. So we had a lot of challenge in the last year pandemic, and the impact on that was much more than the thing which the government organization feel. The government supported in terms of giving some minimum wages, some medical facilities for the lockdown period. But from the contractor's point of view, it is much more than what has been made aware to the employees or other stakeholders in all the project. But the part of the sum which comes as wage reimbursement for a particular duration of pandemic itself, we say maybe hardly around 1 to 1.5%. Suppose you take as 10 crore as an expenses for 45 days in a particular project, hardly the government was able to support that to only 1 or 2 clients have supported for some 1% or 2% just as a minimum wages for the remaining workers and also for facilities. And that was the thing which added into a big challenge. And we were not able to come out even now because the disruption caused by that labor, exodus was still now also is felt even from the first pandemic. Because the skill level of the people whom we have trained, because the construction projects require a specific skill. And once the skilled people are going out, again to get back them, same people may not come. And again, you have to get some people who are slightly experienced in construction. Again, we have to retrain on critical works. And the pressure is onto the contractors. And the government has not concluded any formalities because they announced that common philosophy will be evolved. But only by, the announcement is only to give some 6 months extension of time, which is not going to meet the contractors or the subcontractors requirement because that only gives an announcement for time extension, which with the cascading effect of the time extension add on to the resources also. and supply chain disruption. For example, you can see now the present day steel crisis because of non-availability of oxygen. The fabrication works are held up. The logistics are disturbed. The public was given more attention. Therefore, the essential goods were allowed for mode of transportation. So these are the things which I felt had an first impact which we had. Now going forward, there may be many more things to happen because we are not able to predict the timelines on a big mega projects where we can end up what time, because the cash flow seriously is affected in government projects, because most of the mega projects are determined by, nowadays we go for design and build HAM. Most of the government projects have come out of the item rate mega projects at least, and in those projects the milestone dates are very much set. The first 5% or 10% to be done within 12 months or so. It's really tough because this effect will lead to some milestone damages and all those things, which is not addressed properly in the contract. Therefore, we request from the contracting side, the senior level administrative officers from the government to look into it from the point of contractors angle, also try to make some recommendation to the government authorities to settle this in as quickly as possible manner on a war footing basis, either through amicable or through a resolution process or through a notification, or allowing us to take it for arbitration so that it can be concluded at the fastest rate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Then my next question will be to you only, that in what are the government guidelines, maybe the union government or the state government or the other authorities, to address the COVID-19 issues as well as its implication in the construction? Specific guidelines. Yeah.
Yes. Also, I could get some two very vital support from the government points for the contractors' point of view. The first thing is they relaxed the 5% to 10% bank guarantee limits to 3%. And also allowed some of the upcoming contractors to go with without EMD some cases and very minimal performance guarantee, which ensured many contractors to come on board. There is one reaction or support which came from the government. And also on the milestone payment, they were able to, as a particular time of 6 months or 3 months, they allowed, some clients have allowed for part payment, maybe breakdown of the schedule H, which we call it as a milestone payment. They were allowing it as a breakdown payment to enhance the cash flow. These are two major things, and some retention money which was to be given, held on for a particular year or a particular contract value consumption. They allowed us to reimburse based on the progress for every 3 months or so. Therefore, that was totally, I can say, 3 items were given as a bit of relief. To a certain extent, it helped with the contractor's cash flow, and that was a support which has been given by the government immediately as an instant relief.
Okay, thank you. Now I am moving to the legal side of the construction claim related to COVID. And Mr. Sudeep Malik, my question is to you. I am asking a very basic but a burning question to you. What is your advice to the contractors toward preparing their COVID-19 claims? Under which clause of a typical construction contract COVID claim should be claimed, whether under force majeure or change in law or any other clause?
Thank you, Mr. Kant, for having me on the show, and good morning to everybody, all the participants, all the panelists. And well, to answer your question, let me tell you what the contractors did first. Sometime around January 2020, February 2020, contractors started writing letters saying that there is a force majeure situation. Now, what is force majeure? You have asked me a question, what are the contractual clauses for under which a claim can be raised? Force majeure, if you are making a claim under force majeure says that it is unforeseen, beyond the control of the parties, and could not have been stopped with any reasonable care. These are primarily the principles of force majeure. Now, if the contractor is pursuing a claim under force majeure, they will have to remember, in most of the contracts, they will have to remember there is also a liability to lower the impact of force majeure. There may also be an obligation to issue notice. And what the contractor should also remember is that force majeure usually grants extension of time, and no cost. Now, having said that, the contractors, if they have issued notice, they should take necessary steps for making out a claim in terms of change in law. As you pointed out, change in law is another head. But again, when you are looking at change in law, you must look at what the applicable law is. And you must also look at what are the sort of risk allocation under the change in law provisions are. Having said that, now these are principally the two clauses which the contractors are looking at. But there are other clauses of the contract. There is whether the contractors will have to go and holistically look at the contract and see whether there is a change in the scope of work or whether there is an extra work which has come from for any reason whatsoever. Now, those, if you are making a claim under those, there is a requirement, general requirement of notification. Now, if you have not notified, you ought to notify. If you have not notified, you see in most of the contracts, you will see that the claim will evaporate, go away if you don't notify. That can also be tackled legally, that there is a law of limitation in the country and you cannot just, because there is a time specified and you have not sort of made a claim within that period, that claim will go away. Well, there are, you see, if you see in very sophisticated jurisdictions, they say that if you do not notify within the contractual period that is specified, your claim will go away. But again, that needs to be looked into. So what I have said is, besides force majeure change in law, you need to see change in scope, change of extra work. Having said this, the contractor should also look at the suspension clause and termination clause. If the contractor has a right of suspension or termination, the contractor should at least take recourse or think about that. If you see, in any contract, there has been plethora of judgments which says that commercial sense must prevail. If the commercial sense is not there in a contract, if you are required to do something which was not contemplated by the parties, when the contractor entered into the contract, what was the circumstances that prevailed? Now, previously, if you see, all contracts will say that all previous correspondence will not be taken into consideration. But if you see the tender documents, if you see the bidding process, what was the circumstances under which a contract was made? Lastly, the contractor, beside the contractual clauses, should also look at Section 70 of the Indian Contract Act. Why I say? Because if you are doing something lawfully and not gratuitously for somebody, the person who's taking the benefit is obliged to compensate you for the benefit that he has derived. So therefore, a claim can also come under Section 70 of the Contract Act. So these are holistically, these are some of the things that the contractor should look at, not only look at force majeure, but look at a holistic picture and look at the contract as a whole, coupled with the applicable laws.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Now I am developing your answer further. Like, once the claim is prepared by the contractor and submitted to the authority, what I have seen as a claim consultant, that employer had given their counter arguments to the contractor claims. Like the commonly cited points in their counter arguments are like, the claim is not timely notified, the claim lacks the proper substantiation, there is a concurrent delay of the contractor in the period COVID-19, the contractor has failed to mitigate, which is its contractual obligation, or the COVID is a force majeure event only, so therefore no entitlement for the first claim. So my question is to you, Mr. Malik, that what is your observation on the typical stand taken by the employer or authority to reject the contractor's COVID claims?
Now, with regard to this, again, one will have to look at what the claim of the contractor is. If it is simpliciter or force majeure claim, then obviously they are only entitled to extension of time. Now, in this case, the causation becomes very important. Whether the contractor is delayed because of the pandemic or there was a delay which was there. So therefore, the employer will try to link it to some concurrent event. But again, there will obviously a delay analysis, and people like Masin will have to do that analysis. Whether there is what is the critical path? whether there has been a delay. You see, we all know that in a project, the critical path keeps on changing. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how the critical path keeps on changing. So then, to whose account the delay has happened, that becomes critical. Now, it is what I am seeing is, you see, what you have pointed out, that there was lack of notification, that there was no mitigation. These were, I would say, pre-pandemic position. Now the authorities or some of the PSUs are saying that it's a force majeure, because directionally the government, it's directional. It is directionally saying that this is a force majeure. Now you please understand, an officer of a government company where there is a direction that it is force majeure, how much can he really, come out of that situation and say something different? Nobody wants a vigilance, or nobody wants a sort of a situation where people will be forced to, will there be an investigation on him? But the government should also realize and maybe give a proper direction, because no contractor makes so much of profit that it can absorb the entire cost of the entire pandemic and the extra work, or the longer period of staying in the contract. It is not possible. Now, if the contractor was making such a profit, then the government was not, or the PSUs were not doing a good job in granting that. Yeah. So if you do not allow the contractors to survive, what will happen is they will not pay loans, they will become insolvent, people will lose their job. It is not helping anybody. So therefore, in these given circumstances, with an open mind, people should look at the claims. Now, I can also understand why government is doing so directionally, because the government is, or the PSUs would feel that if I open the doors, there will be a lot of unnecessary claims. So they would put the ball as to whether there is a change of law, whether there is a change, whether it is an extra work, whether those notifications become or has the force of law, whether the contractor is entitled to beyond force majeure. All these, let the courts or the tribunal decide. Now, again, I am saying this is also not a great way of handling things, because ultimately, if the contractor is successful in its claim, then what will happen is you will also have an interest burden. So that is not solving your problem. You will ultimately get into a bigger mess than what you are today. Yeah. Besides the fact that the projects get delayed. So maybe time has come to actually appoint a committee to look into this and come up with a solution. Like previously, there was a solution that when there was a dispute, some amount of money is to be paid and then taken for things like that. Something needs to be done, and the contractor needs to be sorted out. We have heard, Mr. Chandran, that some steps like giving up the retention money has been taken, but that is not enough, because the contractor cannot absorb entire thing, and they don't have that cash flow to complete or to bring in that extra fund. So this is all I have to say on this.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Now, coming to Mr. Anuruddha Krishnan. Till now, we have discussed force majeure and change in law for COVID-19 claims. Can COVID claim be raised as unforeseeable circumstances? And what is the position under the law for the same?
Firstly, thanks to Mr. Shishir and Mason for inviting me to be part of this elite panel. Delighted to be here. Coming to the question raised, Mr. Shishir, there is no general unforeseeability test under Indian law. Usually, unforeseeability is a scenario that is captured contractually. We've heard Mr. Malik discuss that it could be in the form of a force majeure clause, or you could have a change in law clause, you could have a suspension clause, you could have a termination clause, all of which would arise out of an unforeseeable event. If such a clause is there, you would try and place your claim within such a clause. As he mentioned, usually in the case of force majeure, there is no provision for compensation, though I must say that I have come across one or two force majeure clauses that provide for compensation if a certain kind of unforeseeable event occurs. Usually, this is the recourse. However, I would like to footnote this by stating that there is the concept of frustration recognized under Section 56 of the Contract Act, and the Supreme Court in Tarapur's case has said that if the contract is predicated on an agreed fact scenario and that fact scenario ceases to exist, then the contract to that extent becomes otiose. What does this mean? Let us assume that there is a contract in which there is an essential term that engineers from a particular foreign country would come in to supervise works at the site. And because of the pandemic, it became impossible for them to come. If the contractor can establish that it was an essential term, that the coming in of these external experts was an essential term and that was no longer possible, then the contract to that extent would stand frustrated. And whatever other steps are taken by the contractor to ensure that the contract goes on, they would be able to make a claim under Section 70 of the Contract Act on the basis of the principle of quantum meruit. So this has been extended in exceptional circumstances where the contractor can show that it's an essential term to situations such as a very, very steep price rise. So for instance, if a contractor can show, this maybe for an entire construction project, this may not hold good, but if there's a contract for steel fabrication, which is predicated on the fact that the cost of steel is X, but the cost of steel becomes 100X, then perhaps the contractor can rely upon this position of law, can rely upon the Tarapur judgment and seek relief under law. But let me re-emphasize, the general route is the contractual route. The exception is going under law under Section 56. This is also because the Supreme Court has stated, whilst recognizing this concept of frustration, that if there are contractual clauses that discuss unforeseeability, that discuss certain unforeseeable scenarios, then usually the concept of frustration will not apply and you will have to go by the contractual process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My next question to you is related to your earlier answer. That
Shishir, I'm not able to hear you. And both Mr. Krishnan also, I'm not able to hear.
I'm able to hear Mr. Shishir.
So there is a doctrine which you have discussed, that frustration of contract and also the hardship clause. So whether the COVID claim can be raised under these doctrines, and also my question is that is there any court judgment or the law, case law, which can be referred to while claiming COVID-19 claims?
Yeah, see, you have, let me start off with the concept of the hardship doctrine. The hardship doctrine is something that is a civil law doctrine. So we would, in most common law countries, the loss would lie where it falls. And so therefore, if there is a loss that occurs, then it is by default, it would be on one contractual party, unless that contractual party can show that there is a contractual clause that shifts the loss to the other side. Such a clause in the COVID scenario, in the context of construction contracts, could be a change in law clause or a suspension clause, etc., that we've already discussed. This is the position in all common law countries. But in civil law countries, the concept of equity is predominant. Therefore, if you look at most civil law countries, they have this doctrine of hardship, which is also recognized in international rules such as the Unidroit principles, which says that if there is a hardship caused due to an unforeseeable event, then parties are duty bound to renegotiate the terms. And if they do not renegotiate the terms, the court, upon assessing the equitable considerations, has the power to amend the contract to that extent. This has been expressly considered in the Indian context and rejected. There is a Delhi High Court judgment and a Madras High Court judgment on the point where they recognize that this concept of hardship is not applicable because in our statute, we have the concept of frustration and impossibility, which is a much higher threshold to meet. But taking a cue from what Mr. Mulik was earlier mentioning, he was suggesting that the government needs to come up with a committee. And Mr. Chandran also addressed the fact that there have been some concessions provided, but more may be required from the government. One aspect that I think the government must consider, considering the nature of the pandemic and how the impact has been far more than what anybody could have imagined, they must seriously consider having guidelines issued incorporating the hardship doctrine in a slightly different form. What do I mean by this? I do not think that generally incorporating the hardship doctrine in India will be workable, because Indian courts will have to place law over equity. Therefore, you can't change the entire system. But what they can do is shift the rule of loss lies where it falls. Because when you look at it logically, why should loss lie where it falls? Today, if the loss would be on the contractor, if the contractor cannot pass it on to the employer under the change in law clause or the suspension clause or one of the other clauses discussed, the contractor would have to bear the entire loss. If the contractor can pass it on, the loss gets entirely passed on to the employer. But today, in a scenario where neither the contractor nor the employer is responsible for the loss, is it not appropriate to come up with guidelines where there is a sharing of loss? That is what I am suggesting by saying incorporate the hardship doctrine, but in the form of legal guidelines set out by the government. Perhaps they could say categories A, B, direct loss, and C, indirect loss, could be borne by the employer. Categories D, E, and F could be borne by the contractor. That may be a way of setting out guidelines. This will also help prevent litigation on this point, because all of us, I'm sure Mr. Mullik is in the same position. In every arbitration that we have now commenced, there is a COVID claim. To think about the number of hours that are going to be spent in adjudicating this. There will be a tribunal decision, there will be a decision by courts. This is going to go on endlessly. So instead, such clear guidelines may help reach a better resolution in a faster manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Anirudh. So before moving forward, my request is to the audiences that there is a poll question which is coming to your screen. Please respond to this simple question and we will get back to you. Now I come to Mr. Chandran. Mr. Chandran, what are the typical claims that the contractor raised related to COVID-19 claims?
Yeah. Yes, if you consider the claims from the contractor, basically the underutilization and idleness of the period under which a pandemic was there, with some consideration of the government, leftover portion will come. And second thing, the list of item goes as the establishment cost of the contractor, which is called as a fixed cost of the contractor, which normally takes around 8%, 6% in the overall project cost, which predominantly covers the accommodation part of the workmen. Now with the new norms, the workers cannot be accommodated in the same fashion of that of earlier. And the space or the construction area or the developments, what it was supposed to be planned for, now 10 workmen now have to be planned for the same sizes, have to be 1.5 times or 1.75 times. There's a big, huge new setup which we have to do. The second aspect is the reskilling or the fear factor. Psychologically, they are out. Now we have to reorient them for this kind of works, which is also going to be indirect cost under the labor, which is happening. The insurances, the bank guarantee charges, and the period of underutilization, all the other costs which has not been utilized, like the major plant and machinery, which is a huge cost. Though the fuel is not used, major infrastructure project consists of 30-35% of plant machinery cost, which cost has to be, somewhere has to be compensated. That's one of the part of the claim. And apart from this, if you see that, the additional farmer, the clients are not giving that required time for the extension of time. Now there is, as Mr. Malik was mentioning, there is an acceleration which is indirectly being demanded by the client in terms of commissioning of the project in a stipulated period, because the nation wants it, and it's up for the public cost. All the government projects are directly related to the public purpose in in the final terms, if you say. Therefore, the customer feels that if you put more resources, you can complete it. But the more resources, already strained contractors, cash flow for the normal duration has been, requested for additional, resources than what has been contemplated or planned in the works. And beyond that point, the non-availability of resources, because of this crisis, everywhere demand has increased. And though the contractors were forcibly to spend the money by taking some loans or whatever it is, still non-availability and the logistic support still has not been resumed. Even now, what it takes to come in a week's time, it takes 15 days, 20 days because of non-availability of trucks. And this unprecedented cost increase on all other commodities is not reflected directly on the WPI. So earlier WPI was based on the kind of movement which has been happening on historical records. There were some kind of differences which contractor envisages in his bid and marks as a risk and contingency. Now when the risk and contingency has gone phenomenally high, which nobody can estimate, the diesel prices and all these things based on disruption only. So which is not even covered in the WPI, which is happening. The trend is the same. Already there was a gap in the market price and the WPI indices, which was increasing, which has been provided in the norms. Now, with the subsequent increase of the huge material cost and the labor wages and other accommodation and other social distancing facilities, the cost is nowhere covered. Now you see the productivity of the workmen. Earlier, what workers used to do, 10 people assembling in a place and doing the work, has to be remodified because you can't put people together and so closely. So either the manpower has to be reduced or additional automation, which is not envisaged in the contract, has to be brought in. The entire sequence and methodology of the work to compress the speed of the work after the pandemic is a big task in hand. Therefore, if you see really now time requirement with the same pace of pre-pandemic takes about 2 years, we get an extension of 6 months. With additional resources and that too with the increased cost, it becomes unmanageable for any contractor because he has not planned for his bid like that, because he has to become L1 to get the job, and the government makes an estimate also from their side so that the contractors are not overpricing. If they overprice, the tender goes for retender. Therefore, we are not being given an opportunity to take a higher price during tender, and therefore the governmental organization cannot expect the contractor to pump in more cash in cash. In fact, if he has to do, he has to bring in from other projects only. Other projects also will not have such kind of cash flows. That is the issue really we are facing.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chandran. Here, I can also add regarding the submission of contractor's claim, because being a claim consultant, we has to prepare the claims on behalf of our clients. So, as a claim consultant, our advice is for the preparation of claim, especially related to COVID, there are certain steps to be adopted by the claiming party. The first is that the identification of claim heads, that what kind of a delay, disruptions, variations, resequencing, warranty guarantee extension, or the repair or the rectification on the time and the cost related issue, that has to be first comprehended. The second step is the relevant contract provision should be referred to, as well as the applicable law that we have discussed in this session. The third step is that timely notification of claim, that it is the utmost importance for the affected party to notify the employer of the works being hampered due to those events. And what we have seen, that there are provisions which bar the contractors to its entitlement if the notification is not made within the stipulated time. And then lastly, the substantiation of the claims that has to be done with the time and cost implications. So now so we can now I am coming to Mr. Malik. There is a simple question that if there is no clause of force majeure or change in law in the contract signed between the parties, still the contractor can claim COVID related issues under the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Kant, for asking this question. Now, if there is no contractual clause, whether the contractor can claim contractually, it's a that there is a dichotomy in this. But what I'm trying to say, suppose there is, what is force majeure? Force majeure, it is very unnatural not to have a force majeure clause in the contract. Force majeure is governed by section 32 and by chapter 3 of the Contract Act. That means on happening of a particular event, how the parties will behave. Now 56 talks about impossibility and frustration of contract. It's a very high threshold. The Indian law says that you see, if it is difficult to perform, it has become onerous to perform a contract, the contract is not frustrated. Even there are various judgments, the famous Suez Canal case, where goods had to be delivered by a longish route. Then also the contract was not frustrated at all. It may become onerous, but it will not frustrate the contract. Save and except, you see, if there is no contractual clause of force majeure, then the parties will either have to depend upon uncertainty of the contract and the contract becoming void, or the two clause C and D, illustration C and D of section 56, wherein they say that if suppose I am to supply good to a particular country. Now India has declared war on that country. I cannot supply the goods. So therefore, that frustrated. That is, then you will have to say that I could not. There is no contractual clause. Now the contract is frustrated because I could not do. Or say there was a contract between a person and a singer, and the singer and the entire money was paid in advance. The singer could not perform on A, B, C, D day. Now on those days the contract became void. So you will have to either look at that. But what you can really do contractually is to say, listen, I could not perform the work, and if the factual matrix is such that the employer was taking the work from the contractor as and when it could deliver, then under section 63 of the Contract Act, that section will come into play, which will show that they have dispensed with the performance, or they have accepted performance at a later date. So that these are important provisions of Indian law, and as far as force majeure is concerned. And as far as change in law is concerned, I am saying that then it is a completely different. I have discussed it before. Section 70 will come into play, and how the parties and commercial sense and the judgments on that, all commercial contracts are to be looked in a commercial manner. Whether it was making any commercial sense for a party to do. Now, whether there is a change in law or not. For example, in a particular case, coal was to be supplied from Indonesia. Now the court said that, okay, coal could have been supplied from India or from any other jurisdiction. There is no force majeure involved. There is no change in law involved in this. They looked at what the applicable law was. So therefore, you will have to see holistically. You will have to look at section 70. You will also have to look at whether if there is any commercial sense in doing. What was your understanding? What were the circumstances on the basis of which you entered into the contract? Of course, you are entitled to make a claim.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. This is to inform all of you that we have received more than 600 questions till now, and almost 2,500 participants are viewing this session. So now we will be taking up questions from the audiences, as well as if we are not able to take up the questions, then we will be sending the answers through separate emails. So I request the panelists to be a bit brief in their answers, because so that we can take up more and more questions from the audience. So Mr. Chandran, I just wanted to ask you that government has allowed reduction in bank guarantee. So whether it is helpful for the contractor?
Sir, if you see inside, it may be helpful temporarily, but if you're going forward for the project, that's only a temporary relief for a particular month or so. For some time, it is a meager percentage of the investment which is happening. It's a part of the relief available within the authorities, as Mr. Malik was mentioning. The authorities under their jurisdiction, they are doing that. That gives a very, very small relief. There are contracts, smaller contractors are able to come up, and the government allows smaller contract. That way it helps. Otherwise, on the cash flow or on the cost part of it, which is being spent, it doesn't make a big difference into that. Like they pay 2% extra on a running bill with what it's there. That's our money only. Nothing that gives us a big kind of relief on the cash flow.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Anirudh Krishnan, there is a question that my contract is signed in last year during COVID situation. Now my employer is rejecting my COVID claims by saying that it is not an unforeseeable reason. So what will be your comment on that?
This I would, if you're a contractor, you will have to look very closely at the language of each of the clauses. Now, even if it is not you could still have a force majeure clause that is wide enough to cover any kind of a pandemic situation, whether you signed a contract during a pandemic or not, in which case it would still cover your scenario. Change in law may be difficult because if it was April, lockdown was already in force, unless you can show that there was no lockdown in that particular area and now there's a lockdown and therefore there is a change in law, maybe there is a scope to bring that in. But I would look closely, if I was a contractor, at the causation based tests. There are two causation based tests. The one is that if the contractor would not have been in that position but for the breach of the employer, which may not apply here. The second is if there is another dominant breach from the other party that is preventing performance, then that other party cannot take advantage of this pandemic scenario. The best example for this is the English case law in Classic Maritime, where they have said that if an employer, where a party in breach cannot take advantage of the force majeure scenario to escape from their breach. So that if I was a contractor, I would get a delay analyst such as Mason to come in and say, well, during this period, do the time slice analysis. This was the dominant breach. The dominant breach was that drawings were not available. The dominant breach was the land was not available. Therefore, whether or not there was a pandemic situation is irrelevant because I could not have performed in any manner, in any event. So that I think would be the best approach in this kind of scenario.
Okay, thank you. So now the next question is to Mr. Malik. That can any employer seek relief from its contractual obligation, for example, payment due to its contractor, citing COVID situation?
Not at all. The answer is very simple, not at all. Because you see, inability to make payment is definitely not a force majeure situation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Anirudh, there is a question related to the future projects and contracts. That what are the learnings we have made during the COVID situation and regarding to the drafting of contract clauses for the future contract related to risk allocation, and how the interrelationship or the communication among the stakeholders of the project could be improved within the contractual framework, given now experience in the COVID situation now. So what is the, you can say, future strategy to be there for having smooth contract management and execution of the project?
I think we are till now in most contracts, most public projects, it's the employers who call the shots in relation to terms of the contract, and there's very little scope for negotiation. But contractors will have to seriously revisit that, because considering the lessons that the pandemic has taught us, there are many direct and indirect clauses that have arisen that are not directly covered by contractual clauses. Therefore, I think it is very important to very carefully negotiate and draft out clauses such as change in law clauses, clauses that may even be a little novel, that providing for sharing in losses in extreme situations, clauses that provide for sharing of losses even if there is a force majeure. So far, the default position is if it's force majeure, you can't claim, you can't make any claims. But I have come across some of these clauses in the international context, where contracts are performed abroad. They do. I have seen quite a few clauses that say force majeure may comprise of A, B, C, D, E events. But in the first two scenarios, costs shall be shared in this ratio. Now, those kind of clauses, I think the contractors need to be aware that these are crucial to incorporate, because you never know. There's already been a bad second wave. You may have more waves coming up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chandran, there is a question that have you aware of any COVID claim, especially the cost claim, which was successfully granted to any contractor?
So far, I can say it's no only, sir. Some labor wages initially in some Mumbai projects and Bangalore projects, they given some labor benefits like, whatever government extended, some kind of medicine charges and some food charges they are given for a couple of project sites. Otherwise, claims have been lodged, and because as per the notification which has to be served, we have lodged some claims, and many of the contractors would have lodged. In terms of, initially we talked about force majeure, and then later on, based on the situation, we thought it could be also change in law. Because pandemic was a situation for a particular duration in which the nation was under arrest, almost the workers were not able to move. The resultant of the pandemic, a lot of changes in law or the regulations have happened because each state has started to make their own regulations, like local trains are not running, interstate trains are not running. These are all kind of, I think, I don't know how to put it as a change in law, but maybe the regulation of the state was not the same as the condition in which we took the contract. Because if people have to come from UP, they cannot come by, the service which was available by then was only flight. It was not possible. No buses, no trains. Therefore, there is a possibility of people moving out from their location itself was an issue. So that's a thing which is the main point here,
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chandran.
Yeah.
Now, Aniruddha, there is one question that how the recent Indian Arbitration and Conciliation Amendment Act 2019 has been effective during the COVID-19 crisis.
Well, I think I don't think there's anything specific about in relation to the 2019 amendments. I think we are more on the timelines that came out in the 2015 amendments. Now, while some arbitrations have shifted to the online mode, and that has made things very efficient, there are other arbitrators who are not very comfortable conducting it in the online mode, and that's really slowed things down. Coupled with the Supreme Court order extending the limitation and all timelines under the Act, so these timelines have temporarily been inapplicable. Coupled with a genuine difficulty in conducting arbitrations, because when in every office, I think most offices have had a lot of their associates and partners falling sick with COVID. During that time, you'll obviously have to shut the office down. So there have been practical difficulties, but some arbitrators have pushed things along on the online mode, and that has helped. The Supreme Court order on limitation and extending all timelines under the Act has made arbitrations generally slower.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aniruddha. Mr. Malik, there is a question that effect of COVID, will it be deemed as a natural catastrophe under FIDIC force majeure clause?
You see, hardly FIDIC is used, but the question is, it is definitely COVID is not a natural catastrophe as such, because of the nature of it. But again, moving away from this question, because I have answered that question to that extent. But what I want to say is, while we are discussing force majeure, and there were few questions on force majeure that Mr. Krishnan also answered, and Mr. Chandran also answered, I don't think the force majeure as such has gone away even today, because things have not become normal. There is stop, start, and also people are not working at full capacity. So therefore, this is not a normal circumstances at all. The force majeure still prevails in all practical for all practical purposes. Mr. Chandran and Mr. Krishnan can elaborate more, and so can you, Mr. Kant. But this is something what I personally believe.
Okay, thank you. So there is a last question, which may I ask to Aniruddha Krishnan. So how to deal with the situation wherein the extension of time under COVID is already granted, but the cost claims are rejected?
Well, I think while seeking extension of time, hopefully the contractor would have put the employer on terms, because then in a lot of the Indian PSU contracts, you come across exclusion clauses, and one of the way of getting over it is if you put the employer on terms. Then thereafter, you will have to, if there is no bar in the contract, then you will have to initiate arbitration where you make out your claims. During this COVID period, I think we've discussed the broad heads under which you can bring it. You will have to either put it within change in law or suspension, or if force majeure provides for a sharing, or independent of this, you also do your causal test. If you can show, for instance, that the contract was for a period of 18 months. Now we are in the 35th month, and we are in the and the pandemic arose in the 35th month. But we are in fact in the 35th month because of the delays attributable to the employer.
Yes.
Then you can argue purely based on a causal analysis, for which you would require a delay analysis. And you will then be able to argue that but for the delays of the employer, the contractor would not have had to face the pandemic situation. And therefore, the losses arising from the pandemic would have to be borne by the employer. So this is an argument that we are making. In most cases, I think, therefore, there are 4 or 5 different heads, all of which we have discussed, in addition to the 2 causal heads. The 2 causal heads being the dominant breach theory that I already referred to while answering the earlier question, the classic maritime test, and the test that I just mentioned now, the but-for test.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So with this, we are coming to end of this session. In this session, we have discussed the various aspects of COVID claims in construction projects. Also, we discussed how these complex issues can be addressed in the future contracts. So as a concluding remark, what we can say that in a crisis situation, the collaboration and the cooperation is the key. The impact of COVID-19 on society and business is really unprecedented, and therefore for the successful completion of the projects which are getting affected during this challenging time, all the stakeholders, authority, employer, contractors, and consultant will have to work together as one team with a strong focus on communication. We should also note that an approach with conflicting views on COVID-related issues and risk allocation will be highly counterproductive. When all the stakeholders come together and collaborate to take on the uncertainties and the challenges posed by COVID, then only the success can be achieved. I once again express my sincere thanks to all the participants and the panelists for making this session very informative, engaging, and equally enjoyable. I request all of you to please stay tuned for the next session today and tomorrow. Thank you. Stay safe. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kant.
Very much.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Thank you, Mr. Anirudh Krishnan.
Thank you, the audience.
Thank you, participants, for
Mr. Krishnan, Mr.
Thank you.
Chandran. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.